You are listening to Esther, a tale of courage and destiny. This story of the Bible has been recreated with artificial intelligence. Chapter 1. A Queen Dethroned. The grand city of Susa shimmered under the golden glow of King Xerxes' reign, palaces of splendor, markets bustling with exotic goods, and people from all provinces of the vast Persian Empire mingled in its streets. At the heart of this magnificent city stood the royal palace, a testament to Xerxes' might and wealth. One evening, as the sun set painting the horizon in hues of orange and pink, the palace came alive with the sounds of celebration. King Xerxes, in a display of his vast wealth and power, held a banquet for all his nobles and officials. It lasted not 1, not 2, but 180 days. The grandeur was unmatched. Wine flowed freely, guests feasted on sumptuous meals, and the palace gleamed with gold, silver, and precious stones. As this grand feast neared its end, King Xerxes, buoyed by wine and merriment, desired to showcase another of his prized possessions, Queen Vashti. Vashti was not just known for her royal status, but also for her unparalleled beauty. With a grand gesture, Xerxes commanded his eunuchs, "Bring before me Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, to display her beauty to the people and nobles. Let them see how fortunate the king is to have such a jewel by his side." But in a turn of events that sent shockwaves through the palace, Queen Vashti refused the king's command. The reasons for her refusal remain a subject of speculation to this day. Was it an assertion of dignity, a momentary caprice, or perhaps a calculated political move? Regardless of her reasons, her refusal was a direct challenge to the king's authority. A hush descended upon the banquet hall. The courtiers exchanged uneasy glances, awaiting the king's response. Furious and humiliated, Xerxes turned to his wise men, experts in the laws and customs of Persia, seeking counsel on handling Vashti's defiance. Memucan, one of the 7 nobles, spoke out. "Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king but against all the officials and the people. Her actions will make all wives defy their husbands, causing chaos in the empire." After deliberation, a decree was made. Vashti was to be banished from the king's presence, never to return. Her royal position would be given to someone more deserving, someone who would respect the king's authority. Thus, in a palace that had witnessed countless power plays, Queen Vashti's dethronement marked the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter that would see the rise of a young Jewish woman, her fate intricately woven with the destiny of an entire people. And as Vashti's footsteps faded into the annals of history, the search for a new queen commenced, setting the stage for one of the most riveting tales of courage, destiny, and divine intervention. Chapter 2. Esther's Secret. As news of Queen Vashti's banishment spread, Susa was rife with whispers and speculations. The royal court was abuzz with one primary question: who would replace Vashti as queen? King Xerxes' advisors, always eager to placate their ruler and restore order to the palace, devised a plan. A royal decree was issued throughout the empire. Beautiful young virgins from every province were to be brought to Susa. They would undergo a year of beauty treatments, and from among them the king would choose his new queen. In the heart of Susa lived Mordecai, a Jew, and his cousin Esther. Esther was an orphan, her parents having passed away when she was young, and Mordecai had taken her in as his own daughter. She was not only strikingly beautiful, but possessed a grace and charm that went beyond mere physical appearance. When the king's decree reached Mordecai's ears, he knew that Esther would undoubtedly be taken to the palace. And as he had anticipated, the king's officials soon arrived, selecting Esther for her beauty and bringing her to the harem. Mordecai, recognizing the potential dangers that lay ahead, gave Esther a crucial piece of advice: do not reveal your people or your lineage. Esther heeded his words, keeping her Jewish heritage a secret from the palace officials and, in time, from the king himself. At the palace, Esther quickly endeared herself to Hegai, the eunuch in charge of the harem. Sensing something special about her, he provided her with the best place in the harem and special beauty treatments. Esther's days were filled with scented oils, luxurious cosmetics, and lessons on royal etiquette. While Esther was in the palace, Mordecai frequented its gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of his beloved cousin or gather news about her well-being. Their bond was unbreakable, and he constantly prayed for her safety and well-being. The year of preparation flew by, and the day arrived when each young woman would be presented to King Xerxes. One after another, they went before the king, but none could capture his heart. Then came Esther's turn. Donned in attire chosen by Hegai, she walked into the royal chamber. The moment King Xerxes laid eyes on her, he was smitten. No other maiden had made such an impression on him. The decision was clear. Esther was to be the new queen of Persia. And so Esther, a Jewish girl from Susa, was crowned queen of the vast Persian Empire. Yet her true identity remained a secret, guarded closely as the events in the palace began to unfold in ways no one could have foreseen. Chapter 3. Haman's Conspiracy. In the sprawling courts of Susa, power dynamics shifted like desert sands. As Esther settled into her role as queen, another figure ascended the ranks of King Xerxes' favor. His name was Haman, an Agagite, ambitious and prideful. The king, impressed by his counsel and perhaps swayed by his flattery, elevated Haman above all other nobles, bestowing upon him unprecedented authority. With this newfound power, Haman paraded through the streets, expecting, even demanding, reverence from all. The king's decree was clear: all must bow to Haman. Yet at the king's gate stood one man who would not bend. Mordecai, ever steadfast in his faith, refused to bow to Haman. For Mordecai, his worship was reserved for God alone. This act of defiance did not go unnoticed. Day after day, as Haman passed by, Mordecai's refusal became a thorn in his side, an affront to his pride. The other officials took note, questioning Mordecai. "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Mordecai's reasoning was simple, yet profound. His loyalty to his God superseded any earthly decree. The courtiers, eager to test the boundaries of this defiance, reported it to Haman, making sure to highlight Mordecai's Jewish heritage. Haman's fury knew no bounds. It wasn't enough to punish Mordecai alone. He sought revenge against all Jews throughout the empire. His disdain for Mordecai had evolved into a venomous hatred for an entire people. In his dark ambition, Haman devised a sinister plan, casting lots, or Purim, to determine the most auspicious day for his malevolent deed. He settled on a date. With false tales of the Jews' disloyalty to the king, Haman approached Xerxes, offering a vast sum from his own wealth to fund the extermination of this troublesome people. "O king," Haman began, his voice dripping with feigned concern, "there is a certain people dispersed among the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. They do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them." Blinded by Haman's cunning and unaware of Queen Esther's heritage, King Xerxes handed over his signet ring, giving Haman the authority to draft an edict in the king's name. A decree was issued throughout the empire. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be annihilated. The city of Susa was thrown into confusion. The very fabric of the empire seemed to be tearing at the seams, and at the heart of it all was a secret yet to be revealed. A queen's hidden identity that would become the Jews' only beacon of hope. Chapter 4. Mordecai's Plea. As the sun rose over Susa, casting the city in a warm golden hue, the weight of the decree pressed heavily on its streets. The chilling edict had been swiftly dispatched to every corner of the empire, inked in various languages, sealed with the signet ring of the king. The Jewish community was thrown into mourning. Sackcloth and ashes became symbols of their deep anguish and despair. Throughout the provinces, the air was filled with the sounds of weeping, wailing, and prayers rising to the heavens. Mordecai too donned sackcloth and ashes, but he went further. In a bold act of public lamentation, he approached the king's gate, making sure his grief was visible to all, even though no one in sackcloth was allowed to enter the palace grounds. Esther, secluded within the palace walls, remained initially unaware of the exact reasons behind the turmoil in the city. However, she soon received word of Mordecai's public mourning. Distressed, she sent garments for him to wear, hoping to alleviate his sorrow. But Mordecai refused them. Hoping to understand the cause of his distress, Esther dispatched Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, to Mordecai. The loyal cousin recounted the entire harrowing tale to Hathach, from Haman's malevolent plan to the vast sum of money he had promised into the royal treasury. Mordecai even provided him with a copy of the edict to show Esther, urging her to approach the king and plead for her people. Hathach returned to Esther, relaying Mordecai's words. The queen was filled with dread. She knew the protocol of the palace well. No one, not even the queen, could approach the king in the inner court without being summoned. The penalty for such audacity was death, unless the king extended his golden scepter in mercy. Esther communicated this to Mordecai, reminding him of the gravity of her predicament. "I have not been called to see the king in over 30 days. But Mordecai's response was compelling. "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" His words struck a chord deep within Esther's soul. Faced with the gravest of decisions, she sent a reply to Mordecai, signaling her brave resolve. "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do, and when this is done I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai left the king's gate, embarking on the task at hand. The fate of an entire people now rested on Esther's shoulders, and the palace walls echoed with the weight of destiny. Chapter 5. The Risk of Royal Favour. 3 days of profound silence and solemnity enveloped the Jewish community of Susa. The very heartbeat of the city seemed to pause, awaiting the outcome of their collective pleas to the heavens. Esther's decision had set in motion a chain of events beyond her control, and the uncertainty was palpable. Inside the palace, Esther prepared meticulously. Every detail, from her attire to her demeanour, had to be perfect. She was not merely seeking an audience with the king, she was challenging centuries of tradition and protocol. As the third day dawned, she adorned herself in her royal robes, a stark contrast to the sackcloth worn just days before. The gravity of the moment weighed on her, but her resolve was unyielding. Drawing a deep breath, she stepped into the inner court of the palace, directly into the king's line of sight. Time seemed to stand still. Courtiers paused, eyes fixed on the audacious queen, and an anticipatory hush fell over the chamber. King Xerxes, seated on his royal throne, looked up to see Esther. Surprise registered on his face, but also, discernibly, a glimmer of admiration. The room held its collective breath, waiting for his reaction. Then, in a gesture that signalled grace and favour, he extended the golden sceptre towards her. Emboldened by this sign, Esther approached, touching the tip of the sceptre in acknowledgement of the king's mercy. Xerxes, intrigued, beckoned her closer. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." But Esther, ever the strategist, did not immediately reveal her plea. Instead, she extended an invitation. "If it pleases the king, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." Xerxes, curious and perhaps flattered, agreed. Haman, on the other hand, was elated. To be personally invited by the queen was a significant honour, one that inflated his already considerable pride. As the banquet unfolded, the king, impressed with Esther's preparations and charm, posed the question again. "What is your petition, Esther? It will be given you. What is your request?" With a hint of mystery, Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favour, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." The evening concluded with a heightened sense of anticipation. Haman left the palace in high spirits, but his joy was short-lived. As he passed the king's gate, he once again observed Mordecai's refusal to bow. Rage boiled within him, overshadowing the honor he had just received. Upon reaching his home, Haman recounted the evening's events to his wife and friends. Yet Mordecai's defiance gnawed at him. At the counsel of his wife Zeresh, he decided to construct a towering gallows, intending to request Mordecai's execution the very next day. As the night deepened, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown. Unbeknownst to Haman, the threads of destiny were weaving a narrative far removed from his malicious plans. Chapter 6. A Banquet of Suspense. The stillness of night enveloped Susa, but within the royal palace, the wheels of fate were turning rapidly. As King Xerxes lay in his chambers, sleep eluded him. Seeking distraction, he commanded that the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, be read to him. It was a decision that would change the trajectory of events. As the scribe read aloud, he came upon an account of Mordecai, who had uncovered a plot against the king and saved Xerxes from assassination. The king, listening intently, inquired, "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this act?" The servants replied, "Nothing has been done for him." At that very moment, Haman entered the outer court, intending to petition the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared. But before he could voice his request, Xerxes posed a question. What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman, in his vanity, believed the king was referring to him. Imagining the grandeur he so desired, Haman suggested, "For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn and a horse the king has ridden, with a royal crest placed on its head. Let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes, and have them parade the man through the city streets, proclaiming, 'This is what is done for the man the king wishes to honor.'" Xerxes, pleased with the idea, commanded Haman, "Go at once, get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." The irony was cruel. Haman, the man who sought to destroy Mordecai, was now tasked with honoring him. With a heavy heart and bruised pride, Haman did as commanded. Through the streets of Susa, he led Mordecai, announcing the king's favor upon him. Having completed this most humbling of tasks, Haman hurried home, mourning his misfortune. His wife and advisers, sensing the tide turning against him, ominously predicted, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him. You will surely come to ruin." Yet, even as they spoke, the king's eunuchs arrived, hastening Haman to Esther's banquet. The atmosphere at the second banquet was thick with tension. Esther, dressed in her finest, awaited the perfect moment. As the wine was poured and the delicacies served, King Xerxes once again inquired about Esther's request. With courage and grace, Esther finally revealed her plea. "If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it pleases the king, grant me my life and spare my people, for we have been sold to be annihilated." Shocked, Xerxes demanded, "Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther, her gaze fixed on Haman, replied, "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." The king, overcome with rage, stormed out into the palace garden, while Haman, sensing his impending doom, fell before Queen Esther, begging for his life. When Xerxes returned, he found Haman sprawled across the couch where Esther sat, further fueling his anger. The end was swift for Haman. One of the king's eunuchs mentioned the gallows Haman had built for Mordecai. In a twist of poetic justice, Xerxes decreed, "Hang him on it." And so, Haman met his end on the very gallows he had erected for his enemy. The evening's banquet, which began with suspense, ended with the downfall of Susa's most notorious adversary. Chapter 7. The Night of Remembrance. In the aftermath of Haman's dramatic downfall, the royal palace of Susa became a place of frenzied activity. Word of the previous night's events spread like wildfire throughout the city, but the decree to annihilate the Jews remained in effect. Even with Haman gone, his malevolent legacy lingered. Early the next day, King Xerxes summoned Queen Esther and Mordecai. Gifting Mordecai with Haman's estate, the king recognized his loyalty and valor, but it was up to Esther to address the looming threat to her people. With tearful eyes and a voice resonating with passion, Esther once again approached the king. She fell at his feet, weeping, and implored him to revoke Haman's edict. "How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" she cried. While the laws of Persia were irrevocable, King Xerxes, moved by Esther's plea, devised a solution. Handing his signet ring, the same one once possessed by Haman, to Mordecai, he said, "You may write, in the king's name, whatever pleases you concerning the Jews, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for an edict that is written in the king's name and sealed with his ring cannot be revoked." With a sense of urgency, Mordecai, assisted by scribes, penned a new decree. It granted the Jews the right to assemble and defend themselves against anyone who threatened them. Copies of the proclamation were hastily dispatched to every province in the empire, written in the respective languages and sealed with the king's signet ring. News of the new decree reached the Jewish communities, sparking scenes of joy and relief. Their mourning turned to celebration. For many in the empire, their fear of Mordecai's newfound power led them to profess Judaism, swelling the ranks of the faith. Mordecai left the palace, clad in royal garments of blue and white, a golden crown upon his head and a purple robe draped over his shoulders. The city of Susa erupted in jubilation. The tables had turned, and the atmosphere was electric with hope. As the day drew to a close, Esther and Mordecai organized a feast for the Jews of Susa, a time of feasting and joy. This night of remembrance was not just a celebration of their impending deliverance, but a testament to God's faithfulness. A tradition was birthed, a festival that would remind future generations of how despair was transformed into deliverance, sorrow into celebration. Chapter 8. The Triumph of the Jews. The 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, loomed near. It was the day Haman had chosen by lot, casting his pur for the destruction of the Jews. But with the new decree from King Xerxes, the Jewish communities across the vast empire braced themselves, not for annihilation, but for a fight. The new edict had been clear. The Jews were to defend themselves against any who sought their harm. And with Mordecai's rise to prominence, many officials throughout the provinces sought to assist the Jews, fearing repercussions from the powerful vizier. It was evident that the favour of the Persians had shifted towards the Jews, and their enemies grew wary. On the day itself, as the sun pierced the horizon, battles erupted across the empire. In Susa, the Jews struck down those who sought to harm them. Without laying their hands on the plunder, they focused only on their self-defence, showcasing their discipline and righteousness. Word reached the palace of their triumph, and Esther, with a blend of relief and concern, approached the king once more. She humbly requested that the Jews be given one more day in Susa to rid themselves of their enemies, and that the 10 sons of Haman be hung on the gallows for all to see, solidifying the demise of their enemy's legacy. Xerxes, ever favourable to his queen, granted her wishes. Another day was sanctioned for the Jews in Susa to defend themselves, and the 10 sons of Haman were displayed on the gallows, a public testament to the fate of those who sought to harm God's chosen. The fighting concluded, and across the empire, the Jews tasted victory. In Susa alone, they killed 500 men on the 13th of Adar, and an additional 300 on the 14th, but did not touch any of the spoils. Across the provinces, 75,000 of their enemies met their end, yet the Jews remained steadfast in their decision not to lay hands on their enemies' wealth. The month of Adar, once viewed with dread, transformed into a time of festivity and joy. Mordecai chronicled these events and dispatched letters throughout the empire, instituting the days of Purim as a time of celebration. The Jews were to feast, rejoice, and send portions of food to one another, remembering how sorrow was turned into joy and mourning into celebration. As the echoes of their triumphant songs filled the air, the Jewish communities of Persia basked in their newfound peace, knowing their survival was not just the result of royal decrees or military might, but the hand of divine providence, guiding and protecting them against all odds. Chapter 9. The legacy of Purim. In the wake of the Jews' triumph, the streets of Susa and the provinces beyond were alive with celebration. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter, singing, and the sharing of meals. Gifts of food were exchanged among neighbours, and portions were given generously to the poor. Mordecai, now esteemed as a great leader among the Jews and highly regarded in King Xerxes' court, took it upon himself to ensure that the memory of this miraculous deliverance would never fade. He penned a second letter to the Jews of every province, both near and far, reinforcing the importance of commemorating the days of Purim. The name Purim derived from Pur, the lot that Haman had cast to determine the day of the Jews' destruction. But now it was a symbol of their unexpected victory. The instructions were clear. The 14th and 15th days of Adar, the month of their triumph, were to be days of feasting and merriment, of sending presents to one another and donations to the poor. Families and communities gathered, reading the story aloud, ensuring that both young and old would remember. Queen Esther, with the authority of her royal position and with a heart full of gratitude for her people's deliverance, affirmed Mordecai's words and sent out her own decrees concerning the celebration of Purim. Together, their words held weight and authority, solidifying the festival's place in Jewish tradition. Throughout the empire, Jews enthusiastically took on the practice. Year after year, as Adar approached, the story was retold. The tale of a brave queen, a wise and faithful uncle, the wickedness of Haman, and the ultimate triumph of the Jews echoed through generations. In Susa's palace, Mordecai continued to serve King Xerxes faithfully, gaining more respect and prominence. His life was a testament to God's providence, and his legacy was one of loyalty, wisdom, and faithfulness. The boy who had once been in exile had risen to be the second in command in one of the world's most formidable empires. And as the years rolled on, even as regimes changed and empires rose and fell, the legacy of Purim remained. It was more than just a story of political intrigue or personal bravery. It was a testament to God's unwavering commitment to his people, a promise that, no matter the odds, deliverance would come, turning sorrow into joy, mourning into celebration, and tragedy into legacy. We have now reached the end of our story. Thank you for listening, and check out the other content created by Bible Intelligence.